What's up, BookTube? It's Leah Cooper here, and today I am bringing you my top 5, I think it is, most disappointing reads of 2017. So I would say, for the most part, 2017 was a brilliant reading year for me. I read more books in 2017 than I have in, I don't know, since I was in grade school. That might be an exaggeration, but I mean, I read a lot. I read like 113 books. I've already posted my top 9 favorite books of the year. I will leave a link to that in the cards up above. You should totally check that out. There are a ton of really awesome books on there. And like, for the most part, I think my average rating was like a 3.9 or 4 stars. I'd have to check my spreadsheet, which I mean I have, but I'm too lazy to go check it. So 3.94. I gave out a lot of 4 stars. I gave out a considerable number of 5 stars because I mean, personally, I don't really believe in being stingy with 5 stars, and I don't grade, like, I don't judge every book against every other book that I've read when I give star ratings. I kind of try to give them sort of like independently based on just that book, because I read across a lot of genres, and I'm not going to hold a literary fiction novel to the same standards that I hold like a mystery romance book. You know, there are things that I give 5 stars to that maybe a lot of other people who read a lot of really highbrow books wouldn't give 5 stars, but to me, sometimes a book is just there to be entertaining and to evoke a lot of emotions, and it's not supposed to be super profound, but if it's evoking those emotions, if it is really entertaining, then it's doing its job. And so, you know, I'm lenient with my stars. That being said, there were a couple of standout books that disappointed me this year, and they aren't necessarily all 1 stars. In fact, looking at this list, I don't think I gave any of these books 1 stars. I think they're mostly 2-star books, and a DNF. But they still weren't great, or they disappointed me for some reason, and I'm gonna talk about them. So coming in at number 5, I'm going to talk about 2 books, actually, and they're 2 books from the same trilogy, and that is City of Ashes and City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. These are books 2 and 3 in the Mortal Instruments, which I read very early on in the year. I read the Mortal Instruments itself, or what is it called, City of Bones, book 1, last year after I saw the movie, because I actually kind of like guilty pleasure enjoy the movie. I know that's a really unpopular opinion, and a lot of people hate that movie, but there's parts of it that I think are actually kind of well done, kind of charming. I think the actor that got to play Jace was quite entertaining. He was more enjoyable to watch than to read the character in the book. I cannot stand the character in the book, but then again, I can't really stand any of the characters in the books, and that definitely plays into why books 2 and 3 are on this list. The characters are insufferable. They're just god awful. I think Cassandra Clare's villain is really poorly thought out, like especially in book 2. I feel like she had a villain, and she tried to shape a story around the villain and the places that she wanted to take him, instead of allowing the character growth and decision making of the villain to come naturally from what's happening around him. Like, there was a disconnect in that, and it was very jarring, especially in the second book. I spent a lot of time in the second book going, wait, what? Why is this what's happening? But the other thing that really makes these books stand out as just not good books in general is also Claire's writing. Like, it's glaringly bad. I mean, it's like Sarah J. Maas's writing. Like, you can enjoy books that are guilty pleasure reads, and I'm not going to judge you for it. I certainly have my guilty pleasure reads. Like, maybe they're tropey, or maybe they're cliche, or maybe they're, you know, dub Connie. Whatever floats your boat. Like, I'm not here to judge that. However, shitty writing is shitty writing. And that's why I kind of side-eye like Sarah J. Maas and Cassandra Clare, because the writing's not good either. Cassandra Clare in particular has this real problem with abusing similes and metaphors, especially similes. She cannot go more than a paragraph without shoehorning in a couple of similes into a sentence. And I kind of wish I still had my copies of the books, but I do have one of the copies of the books. Anyways, my point is she cannot go, I'm not even going to say a page, but she can't go a paragraph without just ramming similes down the reader's throat in these ham-fisted attempts at writing, I don't know, lyrical writing, and really it's just mediocre writing. And on top of that, as you can see from The City of Glass, like, this is a huge honking book. I mean, it is YA size font, so there are less words here than it looks, but the bloated writing just makes these things horrible to read. Horrible. I was so sad. I broke my ban on Cassandra Clare because I don't like her personally, and like some of the drama surrounding her, and I've like not bought these books for a decade because I just didn't want to get into that. But yeah, I was kind of sucked in by the movie. Was entertaining, and I was kind of hoping that these would just be a romp, but they're so interminable to read. No. Obviously, there's more books in the series, and she's got her, like, interconnected series, prequel type books, and not touching those. Next book I'm going to talk about, I also have a copy of, and that is Dead Until Dark by Charlene Harris. I gave this book 2 stars. Really didn't like it. I don't know why I thought I would like it. Like, I think the reason this is also showing up on this list is I had high expectations for this, and I spent a really long time looking for a cheap used copy of the first book. Like, it's really easy to find the other books, but it took me a while to get this. I ended up getting this one for like a dollar or 50 cents or something, and so I was really excited to have found it for such a reasonable price so I could read it, because like I've wanted to read it for a really long time. I think it's because it's like so popular in the paranormal romance genre. Like, Charlene Harris is such a force to be reckoned with in that genre, and I wanted to read a keystone book from it. But this book's pretty crap, in my opinion. It's definitely a product of the 90s and not in a good way. It's incredibly misogynistic. It's incredibly dub-conny. Bill is gross. Actually, all of the male characters are really gross. The mystery here is really predictable. Like, I saw the villain coming a mile away. I'm not entirely sure if you're supposed to be able to, or if it's supposed to be a surprise, because it wasn't. There's like 2 good parts in here. The very beginning and the very end, Suki has some really good like fight scenes and really good agency, but the rest of the book is just so gross. Her brother is super gross. I hate him. I hate how much Suki is like judgmental of other women too. It's not quite not like other girls, but it's like there's a lot of like backhanded criticism of feminism in here, and I'm not for this. And so I was like really disappointed in that book. The only reason I got 2 stars is because there are like I said, there are 2 really good fight scenes for Suki. They are stand out. They do stand out in my head, so it gets 2 stars for that. The third thing I want to talk about is actually a DNF, and I think it was the only like official book I DNF'd in 2017. There were a couple of books I started and then put on pause, but I vaguely have plans to get back to them. This book I full out DNF'd, not going to get back to it, and that is The Tethered Mage by Melissa Caruso. I have a full review of this because I did receive an ARC copy of it, so I'll leave a link to that video. You can watch all of my thoughts. Basically, I picked this book up pretty soon after I read The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, and obviously you can't compare apples to oranges, but at the same time, The Tethered Mage is being put out by Orbit, which is the same publisher, and it deals with a fantasy society with slavery systems, but it does it in like such a ham-fisted, unnuanced, cringy way that I couldn't do it. It's written from the point of view of effectively a slave owner, and we really don't see into the lives of the slave person. There's a lot of slavery apologetic language used, and I'm just not here for that. But I talk about that in more depth in the review, so you can check it out there. Number 2 on this list, is almost interchangeable with number one. Like, I don't know which one disappointed me more. But I'm going to say it's A Conjuring of Light by V. Schwab, Victoria Schwab, whatever. This third book in the Shades of Magic trilogy, I think is what it's called. I read all 3 books this year because the second book was nominated in the BookTube SFF Awards. And I suspect book 3 is probably going to get nominated too, even though the trilogy as a whole is pretty garbage. I think the first book is probably the best book in the trilogy. Like, it starts out strong. V. Schwab has a very creative brain. She comes up with really good ideas. Her execution just leaves something to be desired, unfortunately. And in this trilogy, her characters are really inconsistent. Like, Lila Bard is... I'm not a big fan of Lila Bard, but she didn't really get super obnoxious until the second book. She does a couple of things that are just, like, so... They really struck me as, like, unforgivable, kind of. And Kaz Brecker is from Six of Crows. What's his name? Kel? I always feel like he's Kaz Brecker late. Kel, though, also makes some just, like, egregious decisions that are stupid, out of character. And then in Conjuring of Light specifically, he makes a decision late in the book that I felt was such a betrayal to the reader. And it was done for lazy reasons. I'm trying to decide if I want to talk about it, because it's a spoiler-ish, sort of. It's almost a non-spoiler. You know what? I'm going to talk about it. So, this was just a huge betrayal. Kel is an orphan, or maybe he's not an orphan, but he doesn't know who his parents are. He was adopted by the royal family, right? Okay. And there's a thread running through the trilogy of Kel wondering where he comes from, why he was given up to the royal family, like what were the circumstances surrounding that, and who his real family is. Like, that's a central theme, especially in the third book, where we finally get points of view from the king and queen, his adoptive parents, sort of, who have treated him like shit all through books 2 and 3. And he's given this opportunity to find out his parents' name. Like, he's literally handed a scrap of paper with a name on it. And instead of reading the name, instead of getting any sort of reveal or information or whatever, he decides to tear up the paper and throw it away, and he decides that the royal family is his real family. Now, while I do agree that the prince, whose name Rice, can't think of, I don't know how it's pronounced, but he is totally Kel's brother. I get that. But, like, the queen and the king have been absolute shit houses to Kel through books 2 and 3, and they make a bunch of really stupid decisions in book 3. I think they both die, spoiler warning. And, like, actually I'm not entirely sure if they do or not. Like, I've kind of erased parts of this book from my head because it just makes me roll my eyes. But they've been absolutely shit to him. And so he really doesn't have a whole lot of reasons at the moment where he tears up the paper to be like, oh, they're my real family. And so it's just a letdown to the reader. Like, you want to know this information. You want to have this resolution with Kel's background and stuff. And it's like the writer is too lazy to actually come up with any answers. And so she just washed her hands of giving them. That's how it felt. It was a real slap in the face. And I was already, like, over this book at that point, and then that happened, and I was just like, wow, fuck you too, I guess. Because the other huge, and actually really the bigger glaring problem with The Conjuring of Light is the bulk of the plot rests on a plot hole. And it's really obvious, and it's really poorly patched up and, like, hand waved away 3/4 of the way through the book. And the book's, like, really long too, so you're, like, reading 300 pages of a plot hole, and then it's obvious that either Schwab or her editor suddenly realized very late in the game, plot hole, and so she inserts one line, one sentence that, like, hand waves the plot hole, but it doesn't do a very good job of it, and it's so ham-fistedly done that it's just, again, a slap in the face to the reader. So inconsistent, shitty characters, shitty plot holes, just unfortunate ending to a meh series that could have been, I think, pretty good. Oh well. And then the number one most disappointing book of 2017. Can you guess which one it is? That's right. It's American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And it's topping this list because I was probably the most looking forward to that book. Like, I have been looking forward to reading that book for years because a lot of people have told me that I would like it. A lot of people tell me that I would really like Neil Gaiman in general. And I was really looking forward to reading that book. I went in expecting to just be blown away and to love it. And then the television show was coming out. So of course I was like going to read the book and I was all hyped up for the television show. And then, oh, I hated that book so much. I have a really long, pretty in-depth review of it. I will leave a link to it up above. I've talked about it before. I think it's a pretty subtly misogynist pile of crap. The experience of reading it was like getting forcibly teabagged a little bit. It was unpleasant to read. All of the characters were gross and unpleasant. The female characters were all one-dimensional, flat tropes. And I'm not here for that. I've mentioned that I think the only parts in the book I did enjoy, there are vignettes after the end of certain chapters called the Coming to America parts, and they give the backstories of how all of these gods were brought to America, and I actually think all of those vignettes, and I think the end of this video got cut off and not recorded, so basically, yeah, American Gods, it was a big disappointment. I've already talked about it, apparently to a camera that wasn't recording, and I don't feel like talking about it again. But yeah, those are the top 5, essentially, books that I read in 2017 that disappointed me. This has been kind of a downer video for obvious reasons, so be sure and go and check out my top 9 favorite books of the year because I'm a lot more positive in that video. And there's a lot of awesome books that I read and I talk about them at length, and maybe you'll find something new to read in, the upcoming months. Be sure and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy any of my content, my book reviews, etc. Or you just enjoy hearing me bitch about books. That too. I do that pretty frequently and without reservation when I read something I just don't like. But anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.